There is significant tension brewing between the Trump administration and Europe, and it centers on one thing: a major trade deal between the European Union and India. And I want you to understand something crucial here. This isn't just about trade numbers and tariffs. This is about the fundamental realignment of global power dynamics in the face of growing geopolitical uncertainty. Just recently, Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary and a key trade advisor to President Trump, publicly criticized Europe in an interview with CNBC. His message was clear: the United States is very disappointed with Europe over this India-EU trade agreement. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about a trade deal between Europe and India, yet somehow the United States feels justified in expressing public displeasure. Why? That's the question we need to answer. Here's what Bessent argued, and this is important. Europe prioritized trade over geopolitical concerns. Now, on the surface, that might sound reasonable, countries making economic decisions based on their national interests. But the Trump administration is making a very different argument. The argument goes like this: while Ukraine is still engaged in an active conflict, while the international community should be maintaining unified pressure through sanctions and coordinated economic punishment, Europe is instead deepening trade ties with India. And why is that a problem from Washington's perspective? Because India refines sanctioned Russian oil, and European companies are now purchasing that refined energy product. In a very real sense, Europe is indirectly funding the very conflict it claims to oppose. Bessent put it bluntly in a quote that reveals the American frustration. Every time you hear a European talk about the defense of the Ukrainian people, remember that they put trade ahead of Ukrainian people. That's a direct accusation of hypocrisy, and it signals how much tension exists beneath the surface of the Western alliance. Let's zoom out here and understand what's really happening. Under the Trump administration, tariffs have become a strategic weapon, not just a trade tool, but a geopolitical instrument. The U.S. has been aggressively using tariffs to pressure allies and adversaries alike. India faced a 25% tariff. Then, due to Russian oil refining factors, that increased to 50%. The expectation was that Europe would follow suit and implement similar tariff barriers on India. But Europe didn't. Instead of implementing tariffs, Europe signed a major free trade agreement with India. What does that signal? It signals that Europe is not willing to be dictated to by Washington. It signals that Europe sees value in economic diversification away from absolute dependence on the United States. And frankly, it shows that Europe is making its own strategic calculations about the future.
Now here's where it gets interesting, and this is something you need to pay close attention to. While the Trump administration is criticizing Europe, they're actually complimenting India. Jamieson Greer, Trump's trade policy advisor and a key figure in U.S. trade strategy, made a significant statement. He said that India is going to be the biggest beneficiary of this India-EU trade deal. Let me read you his exact words. New Delhi is likely to have a heyday because of the skill of market access it has secured. Think about what that means. Even as the U.S. has been putting pressure on India with tariffs, the Trump administration is acknowledging, and I would argue begrudgingly respecting, India's strategic negotiating prowess. India successfully negotiated itself into a massive market access agreement. India understood that in an uncertain world with U.S. protectionism rising, diversifying its trading partners was essential, and India accomplished exactly that. This isn't just a compliment, it's strategic recognition. Let me explain why the analysis that India benefits more from this deal actually makes sense. It comes down to structural advantages. First, India has massive labor-intensive sectors. Our manufacturing costs are significantly lower than European costs. When this trade agreement opens up European markets, Indian goods, whether textiles, leather products, or manufactured goods, will enter at prices that European consumers and businesses find attractive. Indian exports will penetrate the European market quickly. Second, European exports to India are primarily capital-intensive, high-value goods. These are expensive products for an emerging market economy. Market penetration will be slower. Yes, European companies will sell, but the growth rate won't match India's export growth. So India gets a faster, more immediate economic boost. The numbers bear this out. India currently exports approximately $75 billion in goods to the EU annually. Conservative estimates suggest this agreement will boost Indian exports by 5 to 8% initially. That translates to roughly $3.75 to $6 billion in additional exports. But here's the thing, this is the minimum. Sectors like textiles, leather, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural products will all see significant benefits. Some could see double-digit growth. Step back with me for a moment and look at the global landscape. We're seeing something unprecedented. China tensions with the U.S., Russia-U.S. tensions, trade wars, deglobalization, all of this is creating a situation where countries are urgently seeking alternative partners. Europe, in particular, is looking for a reliable, democratic manufacturing partner that isn't China. That partner exists: India. India is offering lower-cost manufacturing in a democratic framework. India has the skill, the scale, and the political stability that Europe needs. The supply chain reorganization away from China toward India is already underway, and this trade deal accelerates it dramatically. And here's the reality check for the Trump administration. The longer the U.S. remains protectionist and unpredictable through tariff threats, the more incentive countries like India and Europe have to deepen their partnership. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. American pressure is actually pushing traditional allies and emerging powers together.
Now, why is the Trump administration actually making encouraging statements about India despite the trade tensions? Simple calculation: delay is worse for America. If India-U.S. negotiations for their own trade deal get delayed while India is doing better economically with Europe, the leverage in any future negotiation shifts. The Trump administration wants to move fast with India before India becomes too content with its European arrangement. This is why you see this apparent contradiction. Tough criticism of Europe for not following the American tariff script, combined with praise for India's negotiating skill. It's not contradiction, it's strategy. The message to Europe is harsh: you've made a mistake. The message to India is softer: we respect what you've done, now let's make an even better deal together. What we're witnessing is nothing less than a fundamental realignment of global trade relationships. The post-Cold War order, built on American-led multilateralism and relative openness, is being replaced by something more fluid, more bilateral, and more transactional. In this environment, countries that can pivot quickly, like India, thrive. Countries that remain too dependent on any single partner, like Europe may soon discover, lose negotiating power. India's successful negotiation of this trade agreement is a masterclass in 21st century statecraft. It achieved market access without capitulating to American pressure, maintained relationships with Europe without abandoning Russia entirely, and positioned itself as a crucial node in global supply chains. That's why even American officials who have been critical of Indian policies are forced to acknowledge the skill involved. The Trump administration's public displeasure with Europe, combined with its strategic acknowledgement of India's acumen, tells us something critical about how power is shifting. When you control trade flows and market access, when you're essential to supply chains, you have leverage. India has secured that position. Europe is trying to find alternatives because it lost its exclusive partnership with the U.S., and America is navigating a world where its traditional tools of coercion are becoming less effective. That's the story behind the headlines. A trade agreement that looks simple on the surface actually reveals the contours of a rapidly shifting global order. India is playing smart, Europe is diversifying, and America is learning that maintaining its influence requires more than tariff threats. It requires offering something valuable enough that countries want to partner with it. That's for today. If you like this kind of documentary-style geopolitical analysis, please make sure to like and follow for more content exploring how global politics and economics really work. And as I always say, thank you for watching, and may God watch over you.